You are now listening to the Take a Charge podcast, hosted by Aaron and Adam McCoy. What is good? My name's Aaron McCoy, and I'm here with my co-host Adam McCoy, and we are your hosts for the Take a Charge podcast. This will be our first podcast. We're recording this on the 23rd of January, 2021. I'm not sure when we'll get this uploaded, but for reference, that's where we are. Adam, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. As my brother said, my name is Adam McCoy. I just graduated from Miami in the spring and am now working full-time for Kroger, would be downtown, but working from home for now, which gives us the opportunity to do cool stuff like this every so often. The podcast mics were a birthday gift from me to Aaron. So we are finally taking advantage of those just a few months after your birthday and a few months after our demo, our pilot episode.
Yeah, so I got these podcast mics after telling my brother. I was like, we should, after being home in quarantine for so long and like listening to different podcasts, I was like, we got some pretty funny stories. We got some pretty similar interests. It'd be good to sit down and do a podcast. So it's just something I thought would be fun. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Aaron McCoy. Like I said, I'm a freshman at Heidelberg University. I also graduated from Miami Valley Christian Academy this past spring. And currently I am home due to the pandemic. I chose to opt out of our shortened season. Heidelberg basketball is going to play a 12-game season. They had their first game last night. Shout out to the Berg, got their first win. Supposed to play tonight, but ended up getting canceled due to COVID issues on the other team. But hopefully they get some more games in and have a great season. But yeah, I figured, being home would be a great way to stay in touch with my brother while he's working from home, and we're all here together. So that's pretty much it for introductions. You got anything else you want to say before we dive into some topics?
Yeah, I think we should inform our listeners where the inspiration for the title comes from.
Sure, go ahead.
So our title, Take a Charge, is in honor of our late father and former basketball coach. Coached me when I was in middle school.
Yeah, he coached,
or not middle school, but 5th and 6th grade, and then was an assistant a couple years when I was in middle school and high school, and then
he coached. He and my best friend's dad coached my team from the time we were in 3rd grade till we were in 8th grade. I think he was head coach a couple years in there, but he was there. He was my football coach in 3rd grade, or one of my football coaches in 3rd grade.
I realized that.
Yeah, his high school didn't even have a football team, so he was willing to step up and be an assistant coach for my 3rd grade football team.
Yeah, basketball was definitely his favorite, though, and one of his favorite pieces of wisdom or pieces of advice to impart on us as players was that we should not be afraid to take a charge as we were playing defense, that it was one of the most underutilized defensive techniques or tactics.
Yep.
So we are taking charge on a variety of topics today.
Yep. So we want to cover in this podcast, we want to cover different things like sports, a lot of basketball, since that's my main sport, and that's pretty much where a lot of our interest lies. But for those of you who don't know, I'm a communication major up at Heidelberg, so this is some good practice for me for later down the road. I'm hoping to get into some sports journalism or some sort of broadcast journalism down the way, and maybe involve some writing. But looking forward to taking some more communication classes this semester. I got pretty much all my classes are communication specific. So pretty excited about that. But all
Some
right,
interesting connections to mine too with the Toastmasters and
yeah,
looking at
yeah,
some different
yeah.
terms I remember from.
Adam's been involved with a lot of public speaking stuff, and then I think he said before he's in marketing and data analytics. I'm taking a uh, online and digital marketing class this semester to kind of help in my area of study. But all right, aside from the boring stuff, let's get into some topics.
School's super interesting.
All right, so first topic we got the NBA season, the comeback after the bubble. It's been a month already. It's been
Into
over a
the
month.
season,
It's
they
been
had
over.
about a month or two of off season, and now they're
Yeah. It's I think it's exactly almost exactly a month because I
yeah.
think they started on the 22nd. Was the opening night. I know they had preseason before that, but do you have any thoughts so far on the NBA season as a whole? I know we're going to dive into some specifics, but
Yeah, on the whole, I think there's a lot of surprising teams for me, both on the positive and the negative side. But sticking with the positive for now, what you're seeing from the Cavs and the Knicks, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. We've watched the Cavaliers the last two games they've played against the Nets. They're looking a lot better than I thought they would. Obviously, there was the drama with Kevin Porter Jr. and we're able to get him headed to Houston.
yeah,
But
I think he'll. I mean, I think Houston's headed in the right direction. I know there was the drama with Harden, but with the culture that they're building with like Wall and Cousins, they're all kind of um, I don't know, very expressive players, and I think he'll fit in with those guys, and they have core pieces like PJ Tucker, Eric Gordon. I know there's some trade talks with PJ Tucker, something like that, but I think that'll be a good fit for him.
they're definitely rebuilding. But yeah, I hope it's a good fit for him. I think on the Cavaliers side, they've got such a good young core with Sexton and Garland, and I become more of an Andre Drummond fan every time I watch him. He's really not got any range at all, but he just plays hard. He runs the floor. He's got decent post moves.
Is Cleveland big city? I mean, they have
Yeah, I
what
mean,
five power forwards or centers. You got Drummond, Nance, Jared Allen now.
McGee when they play
Caleb
him. McGee when they
McGee,
play him.
yeah, JaVale McGee doesn't get much playing time, but JaVale McGee, and then you can probably classify Kevin Love as like a stretch four. He's more a shooter. I feel like now I haven't really seen him play much this year, but it's kind of dealing with some injuries, I think. But I
Yeah,
feel like
calf strain or
he's
something.
kind of moved his game more outside too. But yeah, the Cavs have definitely surprised me as one of the like standout teams. What's their record now? Do you
I
know?
think they're either 8-7 or 9-7 after
Yeah,
last night.
I mean
They're over 500.
that's pretty solid for a team that since LeBron left is really not is like obviously been in a rebuilding period.
Well, and they didn't even make the bubble last year. The
Right,
bubble was expanded to like what
right.
10 or 12
Yeah,
teams before they got to the playoffs, and the
yeah,
Cavs didn't even make that. Like
right.
that's how far down
I
they
mean,
were.
off topic, but a little bit. The bubble was super competitive too because you had the Suns as like I think they were a last seed. I can't remember, but winning almost all their games or all their games. Did they win out in the bubble
I
or?
think they won out. I think
But they didn't
they
get a playoff
missed.
spot.
Yeah, they missed the playoffs by like a half game. Like they did everything they could,
Yeah,
but just didn't get the help they needed.
yeah. I think for this start of the season, I think it's been interesting to see different players kind of playing back into shape. You get players that are veterans or like veterans in the sense that they've been in the league, maybe not age wise, but kind of easing themselves back in. And then you have other people playing for spots. And I think one of the uh, standouts that I've seen so far have been I don't know if you're familiar with Peyton Pritchard as I am for the Celtics. He's a rookie out of Oregon, but he's been getting some meaningful minutes. I didn't really see him, I don't know, gaining a spot right off the bat, but he's getting like 20 minutes a game almost, and he's shooting the ball pretty well. I mean, his stats aren't necessarily the best, but he's getting some meaningful minutes, and obviously I think that comes down a little bit with injuries, like with Kemba being out, but
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how some of those minutes change as people come back.
right.
Not to stay on the Cavs, but there are some guys who are getting minutes right now who probably will not have as many when Kevin Love comes
Right.
back.
Right. And then I think another one, not really a new guy, but definitely a standout is, for me at least, is Tim Hardaway Jr. He's been shooting the ball like tremendously well. I mean, he had one game, he went like 0 for 12 within the last week or so, but aside from that, he's been shooting the lights out. He had like 30 or 36 points at one point earlier this season. His average is up like 2 or 3 points than the previous seasons, and this is probably his best year since his standout season with the Knicks. He's shooting like around 40% from threes, like getting career highs in those areas. So I think he's one that has kind of stepped up for the Mavs. So it's not just Luka. It's not just Luka and the unicorn, Kristaps Porzingis, but I think they're getting those role guys.
Yeah, Hardaway's been a solid like third or fourth guy in the lineup since his time with the Knicks. It's good to see him. Like you said, everybody has off days. Curry had an off day.
Yeah.
This past week too, started out like 2 for 12
Yeah.
behind the line, but
Curry can also light you up for 62 on any given night.
yeah,
too, so.
well, and he doesn't stop either. He came back in the fourth and hit a dagger.
I mean,
on
like,
it, but
that shooter mentality though, like every shot is going in. Like, you're not, if you miss the first four, that fifth one's going in. Like, and I think that's one of his keys. Like, he might not have a solid percentage going into the fourth quarter, but if he gets his mind right, so
yeah, it's the Foot Locker short memory.
Oh my gosh,
right?
we were having this conversation a few nights ago. We were just kind of reminiscing on all the great Foot Locker commercials, and one of them was like James Harden and Charles Barkley, and they were talking about, all the greats had a short memory. Just ask Scottie Pippen, and they flashed to Scottie Pippen. He's like, "Yep, and that's why I'm the greatest Chicago Bull of all time." So,
speaking of James Harden, you've now had a chance to watch him a few
Yeah.
times in his new uniform. I know that Kevin Durant obviously was out of the lineup last
Yeah.
night, which hurts them just a bit. But love to hear your thoughts on that trade.
Yeah, so I'm a big Harden fan. I've always been a big Harden fan. I feel like he gets a lot of unnecessary hate on his game, especially from the media, but I think just the way he's able to pleased with the way the franchise was going, and obviously he's been there since 2012. No,
It had been a while.
It's been at least like 8 years, but obviously he's taken them to semis and conference final. He's in the conference finals, but I think that was the best thing for him. I think it was the best thing for the team, the Rockets. I think every team really got what they wanted out of it. Obviously, Karis LeVert, they found like what was it, a mass on his kidney, so obviously I hope he's all right. But I think aside from that trade went pretty smoothly. I think the Cavs are in a good spot. Taurean Prince providing good minutes. Jarrett Allen obviously killing it last night and the night before, or I guess Wednesday. But based off like the first two games from Harden and KD, it was just so smooth. Like, obviously, I'm interested to see where it goes, because it seems like a lot of people are thinking it's either championship or bust, or finals or bust, or it's basically it's either gonna thrive, it's either gonna be the best team in the league, or they're gonna fall apart before the trade deadline.
Well, it kind of has to be championship or bust because they basically mortgaged their future for the next 10 years with draft picks. And I
Right.
don't think there was any real loser in this trade. Obviously, you mentioned it's unfortunate with Levert in Indiana, but I think the Cavs got better. I think the Rockets got a huge draft pick haul. I think the Nets obviously got better for this year. The biggest quote unquote losers, if you want to call them that, I think are Brooklyn's later half of this decade teams, which could go either way. If they win a championship in the next couple of years, then it's probably worth it to those fans. I think JaVale McGee is probably my second biggest loser in the trade because he was getting meaningful minutes for the Cavs, and then Jared Allen just came in and really took his spot and did it a ton better. He's
Yep.
a lot more agile, but
So staying on the Nets, KD. When I was writing my notes a few days ago, he was averaging like 30 a game. What's your thoughts on KD's return this year
well,
after the Achilles injury?
I was definitely expecting him to look a little different. I think to come back from an injury like that, especially when you're someone who really thrives on blowing past people, getting to the basket, I expected to see a bit more of a decline. I think what's really interesting is just remembering how young he still is. And
I mean, you
it's
think
it's not like LeBron going down at age 36 or 37
I
and
mean, you think
rehabbing.
about it too, like you said, with the draft picks for the Nets, and they don't have a first pick until KD's 40. So you kind of have that double edged sword of, man, he's getting up there when you think about that, but in 8 years. So you still have prime KD.
Yeah.
And after this setback, I mean, obviously Achilles injuries are no joke, and it's tough to come back from anything like that. And I think someone with KD's physique too, just of how obviously he is a big dude, but he's like very thin and wiry and lanky. So I was concerned, like, is he going to be able to move? Is he going to be able to uh, pull up like he usually does? And obviously that hasn't really hindered him. I mean, he's playing 36 minutes a game right now. These are his season averages. He's playing 36 minutes a game, averaging 31 points on 53% from the field, 7.5 rebounds, and 6 assists. I mean, if you would have told me like he would have come back from that, and I mean, he had a year, he had over a year
Yeah,
to
I was watching the game where it happened against Toronto, right?
yeah, he would. I mean, he's had over a year, probably a year and a half, wouldn't it be?
Yeah.
To recover, and I think that is needed when you have an injury like an Achilles. But I think the way he's come back is sensational. I mean, he's putting up huge numbers, and obviously, if they can figure out things with Kyrie, and I think Kyrie is on the right track on the court coming back. Like he addressed the issues off the court and like his absence, and obviously his personal issues. I feel like are his personal issues. So I think
Yeah.
if they can work stuff out with them, it'll be a good team. I think they can be. I think they'll come out of the East.
Yeah. All things considered, the league is a better place when both of those guys are
Yeah.
healthy and playing well.
Yep. All right. Next we got the Lakers. Can the Lakers repeat?
I don't really think there's anyone close to them right now, honestly. I think there's potential in other teams, but they are several games above the second seed in the West, last I checked. The top seed in the East, I think, right now is maybe Milwaukee, and they have the same record as like the second or third best team in the Western Conference. So we've watched them a few times. It'll be interesting because they play the Cavs next week. We'll see what the Cavs are really made of. But yeah, I don't see. I think they did a good job of not getting too sentimental about their championship team last year. They kept the core pieces in place, and obviously a lot of people were still under contract, but they weren't afraid to go out and get people like Mark Gasol that they got.
Montrezl Harrell.
Montrezl Harrell, yeah. They're not afraid to retool and get better. So I don't see anyone close to them right now. That could change. Obviously, it's early in the season. It's a shortened season, so not a whole lot of time for that, but I think they're kind of in a league of their own.
Follow-up question to that is LeBron pushing for MVP again this year?
I think you could make the case that LeBron is the most valuable player every year. And I think I don't really think it's even close if you were truly talking about most valuable player. And people on ESPN, a couple of them, have talked about this before, but you really don't need to look any further than the last 2 decades of the Cavs with LeBron versus without LeBron. It is night and day. And the fact that one individual can make that much of a difference on your team is insane. And I know he's probably not going to get it this year just because they tend to, and I think that's why they've given it to Giannis the last couple years. They tend not to reward the players who play with other good players. Like, I don't think LeBron, I know you don't like Giannis, but
No. Let me set the record straight. I do not dislike Giannis. My beef is with the MVP voting because I'll get into this probably on another episode, but I think there's a lot of disrespect, especially they have defensive problems, and that doesn't come from just Harden or after the trade. Like they when they played the Bucks, they got beat on the same like screen from Lopez or Giannis, and Chris Middleton hit the same pull up jumper from the elbow like 3 times in a row. And the way they get across screens is just they don't communicate and they don't get around it. That's one area I think Harden is not. Obviously, he's been criticized for his defense for the better half of his career, but I think especially guarding on ball screens, I think is a weakness for the Nets. But the way Harden and KD were working together was just so smooth those first 2 games. Obviously, 42 and like 34, I think, for the first game, and then they both had like 30 the second game. But I've seen a lot of talks about the trade Kyrie or like trade Kyrie on Twitter, and I don't know. That seems a little premature. Like I think Kyrie provides a great lift offensively. Obviously, he's scoring the ball and stuff, and I think having Kyrie back, Harden's kind of been more passive. Like he was still getting 14 assists when Kyrie was out, but he's getting those now. But like we were watching last night, he's being guarded by like no disrespect to Dylan Windler or Chetty Osman, but I don't think they really can guard Harden like that one on one, and he's not even trying to go up one on one. He's not even trying to get him to bite on a step back or a jab step. He's just deferring a lot. So that's one of my concerns. One of the things I've seen over the last 2 games. I think the last 2 games have kind of, I don't know, it kind of seems like a different team, and I don't want to blame that on Kyrie at all, but I don't know if there's some bad mojo with Kyrie in there, or if it's just the Cavs have really turned it on or what. But for James Harden's 2018-19 campaign, when he averages like 44 points a game for the month of January, and this is all like without Chris Paul for a lot of it, like he had 7 50-point games, 19 40-point games, and 2 60-point games.
Yeah.
I mean, that was probably the greatest offensive season that the NBA has had in a long time. And the fact that he didn't get MVP for it, I can go into more stats on another episode, but that made me mad that he didn't get it. And obviously I like Harden more than I do Giannis, but I think regardless of that, if you look at the statistics, if you look at what he was doing with the pieces that he had, when he had people like Eric Gordon, who at that time was probably the number 3 option with him and Paul. And when you had Gordon and Paul out at the same time, and he was still putting up those numbers, and he was winning games with them,
Yeah.
I think he should have been MVP that year.
I agree with you. I think the point I was trying to make was just that they tend not to reward people on teams with other high name recognition players. So LeBron, when he was with the Cavs and you didn't know who the second best player was, he got it. When he was with Miami, that wasn't the case. Same with like Harden's obviously now with two great players in Kyrie and KD.
But and I don't know. I don't necessarily think Harden's got MVP.
No,
he started out with 44 and 17, so I thought he was going to go again. But I think being on this team with KD and Kyrie and I think we've seen probably an exaggerated version of being more of a facilitator these last 2 games against the Cavs. But I think that's going to be his role more so than a scoring threat. Like, I think he'll be the main point guard, and I think Kyrie will play a lot of off ball.
Yeah, I think they're really trying to get to where the Lakers are, because the Lakers do such a good job of managing their role players versus, Brooklyn was really top heavy just in the games we watched this last week, where the majority of their scoring was from those 3, and it probably always will be, but you also have to get really meaningful contributions from the other people in the starting lineup, people off the bench. And it's not that you weren't getting those, but it's really people figuring out how they fit into the puzzle. And I think they'll figure that out. I think it'll end up probably being them and the Lakers in the finals. Right. The Lakers are my pick for now.
All right. One thing before we get off of NBA, COVID outbreaks.
Yeah.
They can keep it under. I mean, we've seen who was it? The Grizzlies yesterday came out and said they were canceling 3 straight games. And then we've had, obviously games across the league canceled, multiple games canceled. They're putting in, they're talking about bringing out security at half court at the end of games so players don't congregate with the other team. And obviously, I was listening to, I think, one podcast earlier this week, but they were everything helps, but is it really doing that much if you're sweating over other guys for 2 hours already?
Yeah, it's kind of like the restaurants that have built outdoor structures, but they're still really inside because they're a bubble. It really just doesn't make a whole lot of logical sense. Not that I understand them doing that and trying to stay in business, but some of these things are just kind of nonsensical. I think they'll have the playoffs in a bubble.
Yeah, I don't see him moving to a bubble, at least for the regular season. I don't see him moving to the bubble. I don't think any of the players enjoy the bubble. Obviously they enjoy playing, but being away from family and stuff and just being limited in what you can do, I don't think
Jimmy Butler enjoyed the bubble.
he had his coffee business, the Big Face coffee business or Big Face coffee shop.
I would do something like that.
I think they'll do it for the playoffs. But speaking of playoffs, NFL playoffs. You played more football than I did, so you're probably more of a football guy. I pretty much just watch the NFL when it's the Browns or the Bengals. But the AFC NFC championships, we got Brady and the Bucks versus Aaron Rodgers. It's at Green Bay, I'm pretty sure. Mm-hmm. Shout out to my assistant coach up at Heidelberg, Reed Jacoby. He's a huge Packers fan.
Why? Is he from there?
He might be. I need to ask him, but I see him posting about the Packers and Aaron Rodgers all the time. We're posting Aaron Rodgers highlights and stuff. But and then AFC, we got the Bills and the Chiefs. So we'll talk about Super Bowl predictions here in a second. But what have been your thoughts on the playoffs as a whole?
As a whole, I think they've probably gone about how I would have expected. I figured that the Chiefs and the Packers would both be in their respective championships. I didn't think the Browns gave them a little more of a challenge than they probably figured. Part of that was Patrick Mahomes not being able to play for most of the second half. But I think one. I'm sorry. Did you have a comment on the Browns?
No, not the Browns. We'll get to the Browns here in a second.
Okay.
We got a separate section for the Browns, but I was just gonna say, as a whole, I think one, I did not see Brady getting to the Super Bowl. It's hard to bet against Tom Brady. Like when he went to the Bucs, I did not see them doing as much as good as they are right now. I did not see that.
Who did they beat in the first round?
I don't know. They beat the Saints.
I'll look it up. Yeah.
As you can tell, Adam and I are not as avid followers of the NFL as other areas of sports, but my second point on the NFL playoffs was
they beat Washington.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah.
Look at who they've beaten, and that the Saints choke in the playoffs all the time.
Well, I love the Saints. The Saints have a shell of a quarterback with Drew Brees. Okay. A shell of who Drew Brees is.
He was injured for a large.
That kind of came out as disrespectful to Drew Brees. I don't think this year's Drew Brees is the Drew Brees from 2011 or whatever.
I agree. I think injury plays a big part in that.
Injury, age.
He'll probably retire in the offseason.
Yeah, I think that's all but said and done. Anyway, my second point was there should be more games on Nickelodeon. I feel like if they
Absolutely.
did, they won't do this because too many people will just make a mockery of it. But I feel like for kids, if they did a Super Bowl on Nickelodeon, like they do a lot of promo stuff. Like obviously with COVID, you're not getting a lot of like the pro day, or like kids festivals or whatever they have for the Super Bowl usually. But a lot of time they broadcast a lot of the festivities for like that and the Pro Bowl on Nickelodeon, or at least I think they do in the past. It's been a minute since I've watched Nickelodeon that much, but I feel like that would be super funny. I feel like that would get a lot of good ratings, but I think a lot of people would make a mockery of it. So I don't think I really enjoyed watching the who was it? Bears and Saints?
Bears and Saints, yeah. I would have been better if the Bears weren't part of that game.
The funniest thing was Mitch Trubisky getting the MVP, the Nickelodeon Valuable Player. It was just people voting for him. I cannot believe it, but he's got more MVPs than Brady and Rodgers, and
that's funny. Yeah, I mean, you look at like ESPN for like the college football championship, they had 15 different broadcasts based on what camera angle you wanted and whether you were annoyed by the main announcers or not.
Right.
So I don't think it would really distract at all to have. Now, obviously, there's different contractual agreements and stuff, but is the Super Bowl on CBS
this year? I think it is,
because CBS Viacom is who owns Nickelodeon. Yeah. So partnership, perhaps.
I saw something back to the NBA for just 1 second. I saw a thing where people were like wanting NBA on TNT to like broadcast the finals instead of ABC. Yeah. But like obviously ABC's wanting like everybody to watch it, so they're not gonna broadcast it on a non-cable channel. But I think that would be cool because I like the TNT broadcasters and stuff like that. So
yeah.
Anyway, going back to NFL, the Browns playoff run. So my Browns had a great season this year. I don't think they see it as a successful season, obviously because they didn't make it to where they wanted to. But I think as fans, I think we're happy because just look at the last several seasons. Look at the last 20 seasons. I mean,
yeah.
You look at, I mean, and props to Baker Mayfield too, because like you get him like 5 games into the season, everybody's saying oh, he's another Johnny Manziel. He's done. He's done as the Browns quarterback. They need to start looking for a new one. He's not the franchise guy. He goes out there and takes them on 11 and was it finished 11-5 in the regular season. He like threw, I think when they played the Chiefs, he had only thrown one interception in the last like 365 pass attempts. So he threw two interceptions between like the Ravens game. He threw one in the Ravens game and one in the Chiefs game. So like he's throwing that much and only throwing that many interceptions when he's had interception problems in the past. I think that solidified him as the Browns franchise QB for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not the biggest Baker fan. I'd still find him a little annoying at times, but he gets a lot of hate from
it's unwarranted
ESPN
hate.
folks. I don't understand it because there were people on ESPN legitimately debating whether he should be the Browns quarterback.
I remember that because I was like,
this was like late in the year though.
It was
was like either right before the playoffs or even before the second round.
The main thing I look at is the Steelers game, like the first Steelers game, like earlier in the year. I don't know when it was, but like after that, he threw like 3 or 4 picks, and got benched for Case Keenum.
Yeah,
and everybody was saying, "Can Baker Mayfield finish the season?" And now like everybody's praising him. Like I was watching First Take and they were like saying, does this performance against the Ravens when he like was going back and forth with the Ravens, like does that solidify him? And it's just like the switch up and like I don't know. I think they're on the right track. I think they got a great receiving core. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens when Odell comes back.
I was going to ask you if you thought he was going to come back. I know he's under contract.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's crazy to think. It's kind of like the Kyrie thing. Everybody was saying that he was the reason Baker would, like him getting injured and not playing was the reason why Baker was doing so well.
Yeah, the addition by subtraction.
That's kind of when, like around the same time. Like I'm not saying it was. Yeah, it's kind of a coincidence that he's like doing phenomenal when he's out, but like do I think he's the reason Baker was doing so poorly? No. But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens when they have a full lineup that's not hindered by injury, COVID, cuz like COVID took them out. Like I forget how many people they had out for the last game, but at least for the Steelers game, you had Stefanski, the head coach. You had like the majority of their defense, and then you had one game where like every single starting wide receiver was out because I don't think they had COVID. I think it was just contact tracing. They had to be quarantined. So
that's how you lose to the Jets.
Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens when they're at full strength. Obviously, their running back core is the best of the league.
I was going to say, I think their running back core is really the pillar that their success rests on.
I think that's what gets Baker, that providing a strong running game provides Baker an outlet to do like the majority of their passes are on play action. And he's great in play action. So
you saw the difference even with the Bengals when Joe Mixon went down. It made a difference in Joe Burrow's performance before he got injured. Right. You know, there's a big difference between having Samaje Perine in the backfield and having Joe Mixon.
Hey, no disrespect to Samaje Perine.
No, he's good, but he's young and unproven. Yeah. So, yeah, I think the Browns kind of maybe got away from that a little bit in the Chiefs game. They could have probably afforded to run it a little bit more, but from my numerous experiences playing Madden from behind, I do understand the philosophy of wanting to get down the field quickly with a few quick passes.
Division champs next year?
Who won the division this year? The Steelers. I think it depends on what the Steelers do. I don't have a ton of faith in the Ravens after this year. I was really high on the Ravens coming into this year, especially after they blew the Browns out in week one. But they really have a hole, it seems, at running back now. I know their running game is still stellar with the combination of Lamar and whoever they've got in the backfield, but they just released Mark Ingram, who had been kind of the franchise running back for the last several years. I just see a lot of holes on that team. I think the Bengals will probably be closer to 500. I don't think they'll contend for it. I really think it depends on what the Steelers do in the offseason and whether Ben Roethlisberger retires. I don't think he will. I think if he had decided to, he would have already made that announcement. But I think they've got to do something to improve their run game and their blocking. Right now, pretty much their only strength is their receiving core. And when you're resting on Ben to throw it 50 times a game at 40 years old, you're going to end up with something like the playoff game they had where he throws 4 or 5 interceptions. And I don't think Mason Rudolph's the answer there either.
All right. Last thing for NFL Super Bowl predictions. You got?
I got the Packers and Chiefs. I've had them since really midway through the season. It's kind of like the Lakers. I don't really think, as long as Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes are healthy, I don't know that Chat Henne can lead you to a Super Bowl title, but I think it's going to be those two. I know it's hard to bet against Tom Brady, but I think they're playing the Packers, right? You said,
and it's at
Lambeau,
and probably going to be snowing.
And Tom's used to that from the days in New England. I don't know that the rest of the team is outside of Gronk and whatever other expats are down there. But I like the Bills a lot. I think they're really up and coming. I'd love to see the Bengals model their rebuild after the Bills, because they really did the Houston Astros kind of thing of the NFL. They blew it up. They stunk for several years. I mean, those fans survived a ton of horrible quarterbacks and teams. I'm trying to remember some of the ones that the Bills had coming through there.
Yeah, it was bad.
But it was not good. And now they finally found someone in Josh Allen. I think the Bengals have a parallel in Joe Burrow. I think they've got a solid receiving core like the Bills do. They just really need to follow the offensive line. But, this is their first time really advancing in the playoffs in 30 some odd years.
Yeah.
So I think they'll go down.
I'd like to see Bills Mafia get to the Super Bowl, but I think like you said, I think it'll be Chiefs and Packers.
Yeah.
You got one over the other? I'd like to see Aaron Rodgers get another one.
Yeah, I think there's going to be probably a little bit of lingering effects from Mahomes' injury. I think you saw some weaknesses in their team against the Browns. So, while I think the Chiefs will get past the Bills, I too would like to see Bills Mafia go. But I think they'll get past the Bills, and I ultimately think Aaron Rodgers will win. It's been unreal. I told you the stat the other day of he's 50-4 touchdowns to interceptions, which says something about their run game, I'm sure. But he's been unreal this year.
All right, so moving on to our final topics. First of all, not just this podcast. I don't want it just to be about sports. It's probably going to be mainly about sports, but we're going to try and weave in some pop culture, TV, music, and ultimately stuff going on in our lives, just so we can be personal with our audience. But
much of mine and Aaron's conversation on a daily basis tends to revolve around sports. It's one of our bonding areas.
So first off, currently, what are you listening to?
So I've really been listening to a lot of podcasts, both to get a flavor for what we can do with our own, but also favorites? Just really, there's some good ones. I think obviously the inspiration for ours probably primarily comes from Foamy and Buckets.
Yeah, dude named Mr. Fomer Simpson started out as a dude who reviewed sneakers.
Still does a
Well, yeah,
lot on
still, yeah,
YouTube.
he reviews sneakers on YouTube, and he and his brother started a podcast a few years ago. But it's kind of like us, two brothers that play basketball, just talking about sports, life, and pop culture and everything in between. So that's definitely one of our favorite podcasts to listen to. Any others?
Yeah, not necessarily ones that translate directly to ours, but been trying to dive into some more like intellectual type of podcasts. So I've been listening to one called Reason and Theology with a guy named Michael Lofton and Eric Ibarra. It's pretty interesting.
Deep.
It is deep. It's all about like church history and where different beliefs have come from or evolved throughout the years, and it's really interesting to me to see the different paths that some things have taken. So been interested in that. And then it's not necessarily a podcast per se, but I was gifted a masterclass subscription
Indeed.
for Christmas. So I have no interest in ever being a director, but I'm a big Ron Howard fan, both from his movies and from Arrested Development, which we've been recently rewatching. And he has a master class on directing. So I've just been trying to watch through that as well. And he does a really good job of presenting things.
That's cool. Any music?
Not a whole lot. I have been trying to keep up with AJR, who we saw in concert at the
They were at
Reds game.
They were at a Reds game. Not
2
this
years
past.
ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. They had
Yeah.
a post game concert we were at. They were good.
I think
I didn't. I don't think I really listened to AJR, but that concert was really cool.
Yeah, they really involve like other instruments and what they do too, which is cool.
They had the dude with like the trumpet too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think they're getting ready at some point to release a new album. I don't keep up with them religiously, but from what I understand, obviously they weren't able to tour during COVID, and I think they put that time into trying to build out a new album that they're going to be releasing soon. So they've released a few singles that I've kept up with. I've been a big Anthem Lights fan since I discovered them, just in their like mashups and different things.
What are they again?
They're like an a cappella group, which I know doesn't necessarily resonate, but they're a much better version, in my opinion, of like Pentatonics, because the guys are Christian and they do a lot of like gospel mashups and stuff like that, kind of like a Sold Out. But they've recently been going through and doing different artist tributes. So they did one for like Billy Joel. They did one for some rock group at one point. They did one for Celine Dion, which is interesting. But yeah, I really haven't been. I've been more on the podcast side than I have on the music side.
For me, in terms of podcast, I've always been always is relative, but within probably the last 3-4 years, Bill Simmons podcast. I know the people kind of love or hate Bill Simmons, but I get a lot of interest out of listening to his podcast.
Kind of like how people either hate or hate Jeff Van Gundy.
But like The Ringer has a lot of good podcasts. Like they do the rewatchables and stuff where they just go and take like different movies and break it down. I think my favorites are probably the ones they've done on the John Wick movies. Those are pretty funny. And then they also have a podcast with Vince Carter. It used to be Vince Carter and Kent Bazemore called Winging It.
Yeah, with the Hawks.
But that's a really good one. They have a lot of like retired basketball players. They have current NBA guys, and they have a few like comedians I think on there. But their podcast is really good. So those are kind of the podcasts that I've been listening to right now. In terms of music, Playboi Carti put out his long anticipated album Whole Lotta Red on Christmas Day. I didn't listen to it probably until like New Year's, but I had seen like it was getting a whole lot of hate
really
on Twitter and stuff. Like everyone was saying like, oh, it's a whole lot of skips. It's trash. It's garbage. And I don't know. I listened to it. I've listened to it a couple times now. I think it'll grow on people. I mean, his last album, Die Lit, was like that, like where people like
They
didn't
hated
really
it
care
first.
for
Yeah.
it when it came out, and then like it slowly became like one of the favorite albums of 2018. So I think it'll be I think it'll kind of gain a lot of interest. Kanye was an executive producer on the album,
Oh,
so that was cool. Um, Also, Man on the Moon 3 by Kid Cudi. That was good.
always
We
down for some
finished
Kid
we
Cudi.
finished this on a car ride a couple weeks ago, but you can't go wrong with Kid Cudi.
No, I mean he runs the risk a little bit of songs sounding similar, but I think he differentiates them enough. I'm always a fan of his. So,
All right. What are you watching?
basically the same stuff you're watching.
Yeah. So, as a family, me, Adam, and our mom started watching Yellowstone after Christmas. I don't know if you guys know about Yellowstone. It's basically The Godfather on a
On a
on a
ranch.
ranch in Montana. And like I wasn't really like about it when we first started. We watched like the first episode.
Well, I was really turned off to it too because Peacock
Oh yeah,
came out.
NBC's streaming platform came out with it, and
They're
they
scam artists. They tell you the shows for free. They advertise on YouTube saying the show's for free, and then you watch one episode and it says subscribe for more.
Yeah.
So we skirted around that and found where Paramount Network
Yeah,
was having a marathon on Christmas Day, which the commercials tell you a little something about the kind of audience they figure watches Yellowstone on Christmas Day.
a lot of tractor supply companies, John Deere, that kind of stuff advertised. But anyway, we like DVR recorded
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
the
First
whole
time we've done that.
the
in a
whole
while.
series, and we just kind of been watching that the last couple of weeks, and it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Like, I'm not really big on a lot of cowboy stuff, but like I like some Western movies, but I didn't know how I'd like this. But it's been really good.
A little bit of an Eastwood
I'll,
feel, which is nice.
I'll give it a thumbs up. Also, we've been rewatching Arrested Development with Jason Bateman, Michael Cera.
It really started because
We watched the Christmas episode of it because we were like looking for. We had watched a bunch of Christmas movies
and
we were
Christmas
like,
episodes.
and
Like
Christmas
we watched
episodes.
the Community Christmas episode and a couple
Yeah,
others.
like we were just trying to go
Seinfeld.
through and watch. Yeah, the Festivus episode is unmatched, but trying to go through different shows, Christmas episodes, and so we watched Arrested Development, and I think we just decided to keep watching that. I've seen it probably about 2 times. I think I've gone through the series twice. But like there's always like I always get a laugh of it. There's always stuff like I didn't pick up the last time I watched it, and it's been a minute since I have watched it. So
Yeah, it would definitely fall under rewatchable for me. I think there's some shows where I would go through it and it was good, but I probably wouldn't watch it again just because there's really nothing new I figure
Yeah.
from it. Like I feel like a lot of comedies are more rewatchable than something like we watched Person of Interest back in the fall, and that I liked it a lot, but it's not something where I could see myself going back and watching a random
Right.
episode from it.
Right.
At some point. I would put Arrested Development in a similar category to like Parks and Rec.
It's like
that.
it's got kind of like the off brand of comedy where it's not like
color, yeah.
it's not like punchline joke or like set up punchline.
There's a lot of running.
There's a lot of running gags. There's a lot of like under the breath comment.
We're not huge Michael Bluth fans.
Yeah, Jason Bateman.
But that's probably about the funniest part of his character is his like just comments under his breath in response to Tobias or his mom. So
yeah, one of our favorite shows that we watched over like the quarantine back in like March was Atlanta, and we watched the first 2 seasons of Atlanta, and the 3rd season is supposed to come out I think some point this year. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm a big Star Wars guy, so we watched The Mandalorian, and they're supposed to be putting out like a bunch of Star Wars series over the next couple of years. So I'm excited about that. last topic before closing remarks. What are you cooking? So Adam and I, well, it started with me. I've always been into cooking. I took like young chef's classes when I was like 5,
Yeah.
probably. But I've always enjoyed cooking.
It's been more of a pandemic hobby for me.
Yeah,
I wasn't really into it before.
I started. I mean, like obviously, like throughout high school when Adam's been away at college, like I was cooking for me and our mom, and then when quarantine started, I tried to like find some new recipes to make. So I was making different type of stuff, and then when I went to college, Adam kind of picked it up, started making new recipes. So now we're at the point like uh, we're probably making 1 to 2 recipes each a week for dinners and stuff. So, uh, Adam, what are you cooking, or what have you been cooking? What's going on in that? What's going on in the kitchen?
So I've probably not kept up with the one a week as well since the new year, but there are two main ones that I've tried since the new year. Both, well, one from the Binging with Babish Eat What You Watch cookbook, and then one from my proprietary Kroger cookbook. The first
Shameless
one,
plug.
shameless plug for Kroger and all of their fine ingredients. The first one was actually from the movie Chef. I forget exactly what the name of it was. It was like pasta aglio e olio or something like that.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. Is the dish that John Favreau makes for Scarlett Johansson in the movie Chef. If you ever seen it, that's a good movie to watch. It's pretty good. It's a solid one.
Yeah, we watched it. I had been trying a lot of more complicated recipes, which are really challenging and really good and solid. But for that one, I was hoping to get something that was a little bit easier and didn't take quite as long. And it was pretty good for the most part. It had a few simple ingredients. I think it had linguine, and it was very oil based. It had garlic. It was really simple, but it ended up tasting really good. I probably cooked the garlic a little bit longer than I should have. It was there were parts of it that were a little overdone, but for the most part, I thought it was pretty good. The second recipe is probably one that I would not be as inclined to try again, but definitely one if you're feeling under the weather, if you need your sinuses opened up, try some carrot and ginger soup, and go heavy on the ginger.
So we had this for dinner last night. I don't think I finished my bowl.
I was very offended. What have you been cooking?
For me,
Chef Aaron?
I cooked.
And what are you going to cook tonight?
So I cooked something salsa, black bean, and rice salad. Like it's like super simple.
It was pretty good though. It was like you could do it as like a chip dip almost.
Yeah, it's like you just put rice, peppers, beans, and put salsa in there, like a little bit of cheese and a little bit of corn, and it was pretty good. It was really simple, but I was a fan of it. And then tonight, I'm trying out a frittata with bacon and spinach and cheddar cheese.
Is it like a quiche at all?
I don't know what the difference is between a frittata and a quiche. Let's look at that. But yeah, I'm trying that tonight. Here's what it says. A quiche is an unsweetened custard pie with savory fillings such as spinach, mushrooms, or ham. It has to have eggs and usually milk, cheese, vegetables, or meat. A frittata is a crustless quiche. So yeah, that's what I'm cooking tonight. So that brings us to the end of episode 1. Thank you guys for listening. Hopefully have one of these every week. I'll be home this semester for school. I'm taking classes remotely and training and working out for basketball here. So, and then Adam's obviously working from home right now. So, you got any closing remarks, Adam?
Just rest in peace to Hank Aaron. one of the
Yeah,
greats, the true home run king all time, and just a pillar in Major League Baseball for so long.
absolutely.
Other than that, thank you guys for listening, and
Yep.
we look forward to being back with you next week.